right. Welcome to another filmmaker interview series here from NorthWestFest 2021, the online edition, of course. Very, very pleased to be joined by the director of one of the films in our Perspective Alberta series, The Line. Please welcome. Why am I saying? See, I'm so used to doing things live and on a stage that I'm saying please welcome.
Yeah.
Joining me today, live via satellite, is Mr. Anthony Goertz. Anthony, welcome. First, before we get into a few of the questions I've got, I think as you probably know from the emails we've shared, I loved this movie so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for people unfamiliar with it or who have yet to watch it, maybe watching this interview before they watch the film, tell us a little bit about your film.
Okay. So as many people know and many people don't, Edmonton has an amazing waste management center. Edmonton closed the Clover Bar landfill in 2009. This is this landfill that's like just northeast of the city. And they invested really heavily in our comprehensive waste management center because, they couldn't fill that landfill anymore. So they had to do something with it. And they already had a bunch of recycling facilities there. And it was kind of just the zone that was designated for waste. And it's out of the city, and wind kind of blows towards the east. So, it's a good place for a stinky facility like that. So the city made this integrated processing and transfer facility. That's what it's called, the IPTF, where all of our garbage comes and gets dumped on this massive tip floor, which is just filled with birds in the summer. There's 3 different types of birds in the winter, way more in the summer. And our garbage is then fed into these machines that kind of break it down in this complex system of conveyor belts, and then is sorted by people in these big sorting rooms. So there will be somebody at one station looking for oversized items, somebody looking for canisters. Well, everybody's kind of looking for canisters. Some people looking for cans and bottles, which they recycle, and it actually generates about 30 grand in income for the city every year. Just all the things that we throw away. And by the way, this waste sorting is on top of the recycling program, on top of the compost program. And so I first encountered this place in 2010, 2011, right when they were kind of fresh to the world and really leading the world in terms of what waste management could look like. We had a waste to biofuels plant. We had one of the largest steel framed structures in the world housing our giant composting system. We had both anaerobic and aerobic composting. Just amazing, right? And it was on a tour where I witnessed this act of kindness between the boss and an employee that just stuck out with me, because I had not felt that working in jobs usually where there's a good collegial relationship, but I saw this hug and this like tender conversation. And later on, that employee came back to the tour group that I was on and said, "Hey, sorry to interrupt again, but I just want to tell you why I'll never quit this job. When I came in for the interview, it was for the first time in more than a decade that somebody looked at me and didn't see a criminal but saw a man." And very, very touching.
Yeah, very powerful. That's a very powerful statement.
Yeah. And so I thought, oh, there's something special happening here. And so I got to know Kathy, the woman who runs the place, this company that's subcontracted by the city called Quality One Training and Support Incorporated. And she hires people who have barriers to employment. So criminality is the biggest one. She and Janet, the 2 women who run this company, often recruit from prisons or the remand center. That's actually where she found Aaron and Kenny, 2 people in the film. And just with her big heart, which she goes into kind of the backstory of what led her to start something like this in the film. But because of who she is and also who Janet is, they have this wonderful marriage of kind of good cop, bad cop. Kathy's very much the good cop. Janet's kind of the bad cop. Janet's the no-nonsense, tough one who will enforce rules. And Kathy's the one that you can always come to for a hug. and both are so essential. And one of the people in the film, Stacy, who's worked for Quality One for quite some time, and originally at that time in 2012, I made a short film called Dump, which was about this very thing, and then it just kind of itched me for a long time. And then when looking into what to do next, I was working in the Vancouver film industry. I thought maybe I could make this into a bigger documentary. And so I moved back to Edmonton, which is my hometown, and got to make this documentary. And so I cut off in the middle of the sentence of the who Kathy looks to hire. She basically, the policy is, if we look to employ people who have difficulty finding employment elsewhere. So yeah, criminality is the biggest one. If you have a criminal record, it's super hard to find a job, as most people probably know. Disabilities of various kinds can really preclude you from finding meaningful employment. If you have struggles with addiction or houselessness, or if you're just a newcomer to Canada, and a lot of people come this way as well because experience doesn't always translate, and there's this whole culture to get used to. It's like, I can't imagine. And the result that I've found is that it's a real community. People really know each other and take care of each other and eat together and just kind of have each other's back. And it really a lot of it comes from Kathy. Over the course of making it, however, I have these kind of rose-colored glasses on, and those really came off over the course of making the film, because what I wanted to be a testament to, for lack of a better term, love.
Yeah.
To show Kathy's love for people and how that affects other people, and what that means, and what it means to have a place where you may not feel you have that place. I became disillusioned because I saw the emotional toll that it has taken on Kathy and takes on Kathy. She basically puts in all this emotional labor taking care of people, and it's just too much at a certain point. Like, when we filmed, she had somebody living with her who was a past employee, and she takes care of him, but he was quite dysfunctional, and it was kind of toxic, and yet she was kind of doing it because she's just a very generous and giving person.
Yeah.
A lot of people move through Quality One. That's their goal. Their goal is to give people meaningful employment and send them on their way. What they have found is that people don't want to leave because it's, even though it's sorting garbage, it's a meaningful place to be, where they belong, and they're kind of part of this family.
That's what really comes across in the film, that people feel like they're part of something and they don't want to leave. And I that's one of the things, I think the biggest surprises that jumped out at me watching the film was this sense of pride that people had in the work they were doing, and this sense of camaraderie and real family, a real family feeling that you do not see in so many workplaces anymore. You used to, maybe 50 years ago, but certainly not today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. The other thing that I found very beautiful and surprising about the film, and this is going, I guess, if you can talk to me a little bit about your creative process going into this. I think one of the things that people might find the most surprising and moving about the film is it's really beautifully shot.
Oh, thank you.
It's like very poetic and artfully shot. It's gorgeous. That really immediately jumped out at me. Tell me a little bit, especially considering the subject matter, which I thought was such a great, unexpected creative choice that not a lot of people might have taken. A lot of people might have gone a more straightforward, like point the camera here. This is okay. Point the camera. So tell me a little bit about your creative mindset in how you wanted to tell this story.
Yeah, well, I have to rewind to my work in the film industry in Vancouver, I was part of crews working as a PA or as a grip or as a gaffer or sometimes in the camera department. And I, I was part of these massive crews that were working on these big superhero shows.
Mhm.
And it felt pretty cool at first to be part of these things. But one thing that I missed about making films when I was younger is that everybody working on it really cared about the thing you were doing. And in these big shows, it was like, it was a job, you know, it's like an industry. It's like there's
Yeah.
all this infrastructure set up and the pay is good and the people are good and the food is good, but nobody, or barring the writer, even sometimes it felt like the director didn't care that much about this
Yeah.
Nickelodeon kids romance that we were making or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I had the the opportunity to work on a documentary called Equus, the story of the horse, this beautiful CBC doc by Niobe Thompson.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to come visit home. It was shot here at the stables in the River Valley, the Equine Center,
Yeah.
and there was such a tiny little crew, and we all had to wear so many different hats, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is what it's all about. Um, Two of my favorite filmmakers are Terrence Malick and Alan King,
Oh,
and
wow.
and what's similar about their work is that so a lot of people know Terrence Malick is Tree of Life, Thin Red Line, very dreamy, floaty, poetic.
Especially
Gives
Days of Heaven and
Days of
the
Heaven,
early
which is
stuff.
shot here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really amazing and just gorgeous, and kind of like Andrei Tarkovsky, the great Russian director.
Yeah.
His movies give you space to dream and kind of be in the world and in the thoughts of these characters, and it's just a beautiful poetry to that, and it also feels so with Terrence Malick so alive and like organic, and even you hear these stories of their productions where they are just available to the light or what happens in nature, and they have a lot of moments, a lot of scenes where characters are just behaving silently around each other.
Yeah.
And then Alan King is this great Canadian filmmaker who really was a gig director, as I was just talking about, for shows like Anne of Green Gables, and but his opus, his kind of body of work, are these 6 documentaries that he made over the course of his life. And he took quite a bit of time to make them, and um, they were banned. The first 2, which were commissioned by the CBC,
Yeah.
were banned by the networks that helped pay for them. Warrendale took place in a home for like psychotic children,
Yeah.
and the crew would just film everything, live with the people that they were going to film for a while, got really comfortable, developed intense bonds of trust. Would The crew would just hang out with like the family in A Married Couple, his next movie, which was too raw and too vivid in its discussions of sex, that it was given a high rating and banned, or not, yeah, they didn't show it. And they would live with them for a few weeks before even like turning the cameras on. And what they're able to get from all this footage, there must be so much on the cutting room floor, are these moments of these rare but strung together moments of insight into the human experience. I often think of this one that he did this film. The title is kind of awkward. A Memory for Max, Ida, and Claire. And it takes place at this home for old people with dementia. And there's this lovely friendship, kind of quasi romance that develops between 2 of the characters, Max and, let's just say Ida. I forget if it's Ida or Claire.
Mm-hmm.
And we really love them. He's really kind of bumbling and wears a bow tie and is quite far gone, and he can't really hold a conversation, but he's kind and he's cute and he does these little dances and stuff. And they just hang out, and she is more with it, but she also forgets things. And over the course of filming, because they also take so long to film these documentaries, they have this one part where Max passes away. Over the course of, they're filming so long, he passes away, and Ida comes into the nursing station and asks where Max is, and the nurse explains what happened, that he passed away, and she's devastated and she's weeping, and you're devastated with her. And the next day, in almost the same framing, the cameraman must have been in the same position, she comes in and asks again because she's forgotten, and the nurse explains again, Max has passed away, and she falls apart again, and you realize that she's going to have to relive this. And
Every
then the
day
next,
she's going to have to relive this horror every day.
yeah, the loss of her friend, until maybe by the grace of God she forgets that also, which is tragic as well. And then the next day, but there is a third time that she comes in and the nurse lies to her. She says, oh, he's just at an appointment. And she's okay with it. She's like, oh, okay. And she goes about her day. And that's devastating in a whole other way.
It is. It really is.
And yeah, and so that's the approach that feels really magical to me, where you can just be a fly on the wall and collect these moments. Just people trust you, and then their walls can come down a bit, and you can just witness people behaving. And going back to our approach with filming, is we really wanted to establish relationships of trust with the people who work on these lines where they sort waste. That was, of course, super important to just being an ethical filmmaker. And so that's what we did. We got, months before filming a single frame, we went out to the waste management center. We hung out with people. We went to their dinners. They'd have staff dinners or staff barbecues. I worked on the line with people. I shadowed under a guy named Tyler, who's in the film briefly, and just working to establish those relationships. And so there's this wonderful, interesting information that we could have tapped into more and included more in our film. And indeed we did. This movie went through many drafts of the edit.
Mm.
And it just felt like two different movies as we were going along, to have this informational route.
Yeah.
And then to have this more emotional part where we were just trying to dive deep into these people. And there is still a bit of the like infographic element, like the sequence of the ballet of the garbage trucks, or the lifespan of a coffee cup. Mm-hmm. But there's not on-screen statistics, or we don't have any. We had interviewed experts in the problem of waste, and they just felt so dry in comparison to the other interviews. And it just as I really was fighting to keep it in, but my editor, who's also my best friend, who we can just be super honest with each other, just said it felt too different. And our mentor, we had Nettie Wild, who's a real hero of mine, mentor us on this project, which was absolutely wonderful. And she said the same thing. And it was those two voices that made me eventually say, okay, yeah, it does feel to me more coherent as a story. It has a similar feeling the whole time.
It does. And it's the human story and the emotion, I think, that really wins out. And that's really what, ultimately, that's what people respond to, right? That's what audiences respond to. That's what anyone watching especially a documentary, I think, wants to respond to.
Yeah. And I think that's more respectful of the audience in a certain way, just to allow, because as I mentioned before, I admitted that my motivation is love, to highlight this place of love, to increase people watching it their empathy for people they may avoid or have assumptions about.
Exactly.
That are, and so, yeah. I forget where I was going.
I think that's the big takeaway. I'm glad. It's funny you mentioned that, because that's kind of what I wanted to wrap up with is, what did you find through this process was the biggest misconception that you think people, even yourself, or people who see the film, what's the biggest misconception people have going in about, the types of people that work in a place like this versus what the reality is?
I think the biggest thing that I wanted to highlight is that community can is a huge improvement to people's well-being.
Mhm.
It gives them a sense of peace and some stability and camaraderie and all these wonderful social benefits. I wanted to say that we can, that we can make a lot of assumptions about people who have been in jail, but these people are really our brothers and sisters, and but to say it out loud like that can feel a little bit crass or like sentimental maybe. There is a beautiful poetic parallel that I loved and saw throughout the process between the problem of garbage and the problem of prison, in that garbage is this massive social ill that we all contribute to, as is prison. We all pay for it, and in more ways than one, financially, but also recidivism and just stigma and just all the social damage that comes from being incarcerated. And it's a problem that's kept out of sight and out of mind. Our garbage is taken from out back, and in the wee hours of the morning, and with regards to incarcerated people, if their rights are eroded, we don't see it. Their rights are pretty awful, and we don't see it. And also, it's like, well, they broke the law anyway. So a lot of us see a lot of us, I think, have this tacit assumption maybe that prisons serve a good purpose. It's like good to have, at least some prison, but they keep getting bigger, and they don't do much good. They don't do much good for people. In fact, they really harm people very, very much, psychologically and in so many other ways, financially. But it's a problem that we don't really look at. And I think that, a documentary has this wonderful opportunity to just show it, without telling it too much. Now, I know that we did tell it a lot because we have these interviews where people are talking explicitly about their struggles in their life and stuff like that. But that to me is still showing it with regards to garbage, rather than talking about all this information about how big the problem of garbage is, which can sometimes feel preachy if you're hearing the filmmaker's voice too much. But to just show it, to show these mountains, hopefully can allow some reflection on this problem. Like, you can see things that you threw away that day, or whatever.
Yeah. And I think you couldn't have possibly known this when you were making the film, but it's funny you mentioned the importance of the sense of community and the sense of belonging. And I think if anyone's realized over the past 13, 14 months, just how important, just how much we've all taken that for granted as just a normal everyday part of our lives, and how important it actually is. So
Yeah.
I urge people to watch the film. How can they get in touch with you if they've got questions after they watch the film? Where can they find you?
I'm super easy to reach because I'm not famous and I don't need to filter anything. So my name is Anthony Goertz, and you can just find me anywhere. Anthony
Facebook,
Goertz
Twitter, all those?
Yeah,
Are you on all the
587-336-8902 if you want to fire me a text or whatever.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. Really appreciate it, and thrilled to have your movie in the lineup.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.